Hey everyone, welcome back to the pod. Listen, in true chaos whisperer fashion, I am in a very loud airport, so hopefully this records well. But Ciarra, what's going on? How's your week been?
Week has been good. Week has been great. I just went to the pumpkin patch yesterday with my friends. We did a little corn maze. Yeah, it was nice. We actually didn't see one pumpkin because we went to the corn maze and we're adults. We got a little, hard cider. Then we waited like an hour in line for donuts, but they were delicious donuts. So, little apple cider donuts for the fall. But it
Apple
was
cider
nice.
donuts sound glorious.
It's stunning. And you know what? Like, it was nice. Like, when you're a kid, it's so easy to do these activities, like if your family does these outings and stuff. But as an adult, I appreciate it when my friends are like, let's hop in the car, go for an hour, and look at some pumpkins and like have some fun. So,
You say it's easy, but as the mother of the two of us, it is not easy because we have trunk or treat coming up. And this girl cannot decide on what she wants to be for Halloween. And I'm like, listen, if we're going to do trunk or treat, I need to know what I'm decorating the trunk as, and that has to complement your costume. So I think we landed on some sort of woodland creature. I think we're going to do like a fairy, elf, something magical
okay,
witch.
fantastical. I love
Yeah,
she
yeah,
into
yeah.
right now. Is that like her like a fantasy? Is that her favorite genre?
A little bit. She's went through a little bit of a fairy stage, but I think it's based on the TikTok sound. She was a fairy, which
Yeah, yeah, she was a fairy. Yeah.
so yeah, but I'm headed to Spain for work. So I was like, we gotta get this going because trunk or treat is coming up with a vengeance. It's in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Y'all heard that here first. She's international, y'all. Booked and busy.
So yeah, I love it. I love this time in my life and the chaos that it brings. But this episode we're taking a little bit of a detour and going back to some of our deconstruction stuff because that is actually how Ciarra and I connected because she is the gardening theologian and deconstruction is like her jammy jam. And I, on my own deconstruction journey, coupled with feminism, how do we decenter the male gaze? And recently I had a post on that came into the group chat. Now, in all fairness, I did not see the original post. It wasn't like I was seeking it out. I have a group of girlfriends that are like, they're just my deconstruction buddies. You know what I mean? We met at church and then we ended up deconstructing around the same time and we just kept our group chat going and stuff like that. And so one of our ex-pastors, because we no longer go to that church, we're no longer affiliated there, he made this, and he doesn't work there anymore, but he made this post about being uncomfortable, it seemed like, he was asking the public how he should have handled an interaction with a young woman who he was representing a group, I'm assuming the new church that he works for. And he asked, how should he have handled this situation where the woman bent over the table and her breasts were showing and he was able to see down her shirt. And then it's one of those like, he's like, well, I stood up, and he makes this comment about, gravity is working against you. And it just infuriated me instantly in the group chat. I am like, and this, and this is why I can't. And so, mind you, I was like, well, who's going to say something? Because I didn't see the post. So I'm like, who's going to comment? And they were all like, I mean, you have a platform, so we vote you. So I made a video about it. Said pastor has since seen the video and slid into my DMs. But it really got me thinking about, it's not about him in particular, right? It's not about him specifically. It's about why and how do we center so much of maleness within ministry? Like, it is just such a, like, the only way to come to the throne or come to the Father is through the gaze of this masculinity, this heteronormative patriarchal control. And like, why has that been so normalized? And so I guess my question, like, when I brought it to you, we had a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
And I love your take on queer theology and how that fits with the way that we can just live our lives and just a liberationalist lens and a womanist lens. And I think, there's so many women in our listenership that are going through that same kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
and it impacts the work that we do, right? Because how we show up spiritually is how we show up anywhere.
Yeah.
So, all that to say, what are your thoughts?
So many thoughts. I think it's an important, which you might have highlighted and then I didn't catch it, but like I think it's important to name that the young woman in the story is like a girl. She's not
Yeah,
a like
she's
yeah,
not. And I think I use the
I say
term
young
because
woman. She's a girl.
came out in the subsequent comments that she was, if not underage, she was younger, right? So like we're gonna think like maybe
Senior high
on a
school.
good like teen-ish, but this man is our age or my age or
Yeah,
older. He's in his 40s, and that
yeah.
is not young to be wrestling with these things. But I think it it points to this bigger issue of these older men, middle-aged men who are leaders
Mhm.
and have access to these young women. And listen, I live in Texas, and there is a Bible driven scandal every other day. These men are out here wilding. They are taking advantage of women and creating more and more victims. It just, I mean, we just had Gateway Church came out. Robert Morris, he just came out and he's going to jail
Mm,
for abusing a girl in the 80s.
mm,
But
mm.
he's still platformed. He's still on the platform. He took a year off. Tony, and it's not just a white people thing. What's his name? Tony Evans from Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship. He never disclosed exactly what happened. He just said he had some sexual, or he didn't even say sexual. He said he had an inappropriate relationship with a young woman. What
Mm.
does that mean? And where's she at? And what is this? And, and he took a year off of ministry, and then now he's back on the platform. He's
Yeah.
he's back doing the same thing. And then we don't, and it even like goes to like generational thing because his daughter is Priscilla Shriver. So like she is doing all these things, and so it's like where we just hold on to this theology of patriarchy, and I just
Mhm.
fucking had it. Like I can't.
Mm,
I literally I went into a rage. I went to a
mm.
rage. I was so
Yeah.
mad. I'm still mad.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, you bring up so many great points. I think, there's a famous black pastor, I'm trying to remember who it was, but like he was accused, I think, of like doing something inappropriate with like young men in his church. And I remember like when he talked about it, like I think that he talked about it like being under the attack of like the enemy, and like his church gave him like a standing ovation. I remember thinking about that a lot. And I can't remember what
I mean,
pastor
we can listen John Gray and his sexual impropriety, and he keeps cheating on his wife, and then
mm,
having her sit there looking like a boo boo the fool, talking
yeah,
about like, oh, I support my man, and all this other kind of stuff, and like you were just sanctioning abuse and calling it worship.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think one, like I mentioned the age of the person because I think it's important to highlight that like this type of, which I do think it's like a spiritual grooming behavior, starts really early from male pastors towards women in the church. This planting of a seed that their body and their sexuality is the thing to be controlled, not men's behavior and perception of women. And I think that like in general, women and queer culture are scapegoated in the church so that cis heterosexual men and just cis men period don't have to engage with the ways they perpetuate violence. Like for example, like one of my favorite experiences with Pride in the Pew was actually when Cass was there. We went to an amazing conference at Spelman with Pride in the Pews. It was an amazing Black queer affirming religious organization, and they brought in some pastors who re-preached the clobber passages, which are the passages utilized to denigrate and subjugate and malign queer folks, like for example Sodom and Gomorrah. And one thing that one of the pastors did when he repreached Sodom and Gomorrah is he said like the issue with Sodom and Gomorrah was sexual violence. Like the issue is that these angels wanted to rape Lot. It is not that their queerness was the issue, and we're conflating queerness and violence when we do this. And so I think there are ways that men in general perpetuate sexual violence in the church, and by saying homosexuality is the issue, or by saying women's bodies are the issue, the men that are perpetuating this violence don't have to look at themselves. And I think it also hides a lot of grooming and like I think unsafe male leaders in the church. Like for example, when you told your story, you reminded me what you experienced just recently with this pastor seeing his post. It reminded me of like when I was like maybe 15 or 14 at like some ministry conference, and like I've always been a tomboy, so I've never worn things that were like maybe super short. But I think that day I was wearing like a skirt and like a shirt, and like they had us do an altar call, so we had to like be on our knees and like pray.
As teenagers wear skirts and shorts
Yes,
and have
yes,
legs. Like that's
yes,
the thing. This
yeah.
keep going. I have
Yeah.
yes. Like I
No,
said,
no, I
I'm
was
in a
gonna
rage.
let's just finish
I'm
real
in a
quick.
rage.
No, it's okay, it's okay. But like, I remember later, like my pastor being like, "Oh, like when you were praying, like your skirt was like a little short," and like I hadn't thought about that in years until you brought up this conversation. But I think like what actually, I think for me, like what I think about that story as a grown woman is like, okay, like you felt inappropriate desire for me. And like, because I'm underage and you don't want to think about the fact that you're being inappropriate, then it's easier for you to shame my body. And so what I'm really getting at is like, what I think what we see is like cis men in the church displacing all of their own shame, displacing all of their own poor behavior onto marginalized people's bodies so they don't have to be culpable. Then they're able to insulate their own power because it's not their sexuality that's the issue. It's them that are trying to hold the line against all this temptation, and we need to prop up men by supporting them in this endeavor. Like, I think it insulates patriarchal power.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me that I keep coming back to is why is it that my mere existence as a woman, things that I have no control over, my hips, my boobs, the shape of my body in general, things that are just part of being the gender for which I perform, because we can get into the whole idea of gender performance, but the gender in which I perform, why is that a marker of someone else's ability or inability to be holy? And that to me is like what I keep coming back to is like this idea that women are fully formed. Like we are fully in existence. We have a full depth of knowledge and behavior and understanding. Hopefully we are finding spaces where we can exist in those ways. But the church is committed to making those spaces not safe because of just our existence. And by saying like, well, how should I have handled this? Sir, I don't know. I don't know. Like it's the bringing it out into the public forum and asking a question that is really between you, what's in your pants, and what happened and how that woman felt in that moment. Because what I didn't mention is that he made a comment about how gravity is working against her. So he's going to stand up so that it was giving, you got a little uncomfortable. And so you got to stand up to adjust yourself. And now you're telling this young girl that she made you uncomfortable by signing up for a form.
Well, I think like one, like, yes, like, I love what you said around like, like making your holiness everyone else's issue or like maintaining that everyone else's issue. And like, I think, yes, like I was talking about the story with my youth pastor and I think with this man and something else I should highlight, which I see as connected, but a little different is even as someone a young woman who did many youth sports growing up, I had 3 out of like my 6 male coaches get in trouble for or go to jail for, like sexual assault or sexual violence, throughout my childhood youth. And so I think like and even in college,
You're
yeah,
lying. Go to jail?
go
And that's
to
what I'm talking about. It is the precursor for rape culture.
Yes. No, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think, like, I guess, like, I think we're not acknowledging how vulnerable young women are when they are around male leaders. And I think male leaders, as I said, like, are displacing their responsibility to be safe people by blaming young women's bodies and also planting a seed very early in a church setting that if women experience sexual violence or sexual harm, it is their fault. Because and like I think it's very early grooming of women to feel responsible for men's behavior. And I think we see this play out in Christian women's marriages, even how much abuse is stomached, how much spiritual abuse is normalized, or how much women make themselves small to prop up their male partners. That grooming also happens through these pastors and how they teach and talk to young women as they're coming up in the church. And I think we really downplay how much the church is teaching all of us how to relate to our own sexuality and how vital it is that we have different messaging coming out of these spaces. And I really feel like Honk for Jesus really shows this dynamic of how
I was just going to bring that up. I was obsessed. I still am. Actually, you know what? I'm not getting on a plane. I might download it and watch it because I think that it perfectly exemplified so many different layers. Not like the queer theme. First of all, spoiler alert: if you haven't watched the movies, pause now, go watch the movie, and then come back to the podcast. The theme of he was like propped up in this big mega church and trying to maintain that position while squashing and victimizing young men, that theme. But I really think about like is it Regina King? No, it's not. I always get them mixed up.
Regina Hall.
Regina Hall. It's not Regina King. Regina King is Boondocks. Regina Hall is the meme with the. Okay.
Yes.
So Regina Hall and her whole idea of like, she was working so hard to do all the right things and perform her function so that she could maintain his purity and his power and his status, because, and this is the part that to me it was like so heartbreaking, because her status was so intimately connected to his, and
Yes.
she
Come
was
on now.
so enmeshed, and she did not have her own agency. Her whole identity was wrapped up in what he was doing, what he wasn't doing. And when he started to act out in a way that was natural to him as far
Mhm.
as his sexuality, then it became, you can't do that because you're threatening my. So if we teach girls at an early age to monitor and maintain the men around them, then it validates the abdication of responsibility by men. We teach girls to hold on to all this responsibility, literally holding up the sky, holding up sky daddy for the men around them. But it doesn't leave us any agency or any space to have our own sense of self or our own sense of, because we're so focused on making sure the man and the men in our life are taking, not just taken care of, but are not acting outside of these boxes that are created by patriarchy and colonialism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
just, I think about how in my life that like played out, because that was a big thing in my marriage. I remember going out and like we would go out to dinner with a couple, and I always have made more money than he does. I still make more money than he does. And so I would go out and I would slide my credit card across the table so that he could pay and so I could protect his sense of masculinity, right? And so we're in these Christian spaces, we're going to dinner with these Christian couples, and I am, you know, just perpetuating the myth that he is the head of household. Meanwhile, I don't know if that man ever, if he had to log in to pay the mortgage, I don't know if he could find it. You know?
It's really funny, actually.
It's funny but sad.
Yeah.
Like I just, and I think that we just spend so much time, especially as Black people, we're holding on to these things that just don't objectively, and I use that loosely, that just don't make sense. It's not the way that we actually exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think I love just all the things that interwoven there, like from it's impacting your actual marriage to how we see it play out in the church. And it's true that, I did my undergraduate thesis on, it was called Dismantling Racial and Gender Hierarchies, the examination of Black women's spirituality. And I interviewed Black women pastors across the US about their experiences in the Black church. And one thing they said is like, we have our masters and our PhDs, but we frequently see Black men with their bachelors or less hired over us in the church, or we see married women get positions above us because they're tied to patriarchal power, or their status as ministers is tied to their connection and desirability to men. I think that in the church, like there is this pathologization of single women as like, what's wrong with you that you can't get this good Christian man? And there's also this valorization of married women as being pious, as being a Proverbs 31 wife. They love their Proverbs 31. If I see one more Proverbs 31 conference, I'm going to die.
Yo, have you watched the Netflix remake of the Ruth and Boaz story?
No, I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah, I'm not gonna watch it. I'm just gonna like, I don't need to watch it. But it's this idea that we keep platforming this story that like Ruth and Boaz had this great master love affair, but we don't talk about how Naomi was basically pimping out her daughter-in-law, or we don't talk about like, you know, I think it's, what is, you're the theologian, so like washing the feet and all that other kind of stuff. How that can, they talked about that at Pride in the Poos. How they was doing it. They was doing it. They was fucking.
Wait, who was fucking?
Ruth and Boaz. When
What?
that was an interpretation. Maybe you missed that part, but that was an interpretation. I can't remember who brought it up, but that was an interpretation that when she talks about, she goes in and sits at the foot of his bed and sits by his bedside and waits for him overnight. And I think she either washes her feet. I don't know what she was doing, but like how if you go back to certain translations, it's basically like she was giving him like a job.
Yeah. Okay, I did not know about that. I did not know about that.
I mean, it's an interpretation, but this is what I'm saying is like we keep.
That's amazing.
Listen, you stayed in that man's house overnight, and you was attracted to him. and this is the whole idea of like, and I'm not saying one thing or another. I'm not trying to like saying, well, any woman would in that situation. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is the assumption that Ruth had no agency within that situation and that she wasn't in a consensual relationship with this man who she had sexual attraction to and wanted to be her husband. Like I don't see anything. We teach people that you have to wait to be chosen. We teach these women that you have to wait for your Boaz to come to you. But in that story, I see Ruth coming to her own and her and Naomi being like, "You want that man? Let's go get him." Like they like, and if you want to have sex with that man, have sex with that man. Like that's how I see that story. But we
I'm not
don't.
gonna
We
lie,
don't talk
I do
about that.
not know this. I do not know Ruth and Boaz's story at all. I couldn't tell you one.
Yeah, girl, they be telling the straight girls that's how you need to be functioning.
I do
It's
not.
four
That's the
chapters,
kind of story I don't know.
honey. It's 4 chapters of the Bible that everybody's like, this is what you need to be looking for.
See, this is. I guess this is showing I don't know all my Old Testament. You know what I'm saying? But so I cannot. I don't know
Not
about
me
it.
teaching the
I know some
theologian
people
something. What?
definitely are. I don't know. I feel like that's like one Bible story I've never heard preached and I've never heard talked about. I don't know why. That's crazy.
You didn't go to enough black, straight centered mega churches.
I
That
guess
is what I hear.
Assemblies of God, white denomination, they were not given that as much.
Oh
But
no. The
I feel like
missionary Baptist, it was like, wait for your Boaz, go. But literally in the story, she's like, they like go out there and work hard in the field so a man will find you. That's literally in the story. It's giving enslavement. It's giving like it's so problematic. But go ahead, Netflix, go off and make a new remake of this and
now I
let's
got
just regurgitate it one more time.
gotta watch this. I gotta read y'all. I'm gonna go face my books and come back to the Ruth and Boaz. But maybe I'll check it out on Netflix too. So I don't know. I definitely gotta check out the Ruth Boaz story. But I think in general, like one thing I can speak to within this is just it's true that like the churches put a lot of money and time into conferences, sermons, and messaging around how men and women should relate to each other, what Bible stories to point to, which I guess is Ruth. You said they point to Ruth and Boaz as like what, like they're the archetype.
Yeah, the guy like it's the Ruth story and how how Ruth was married to Naomi's son and then
Mhm.
she like and that whole idea of like wherever you go there I shall be, that comes
Mhm.
from Ruth saying that to Naomi, like your family is my family, right? But people miss it and switch it and like as if Ruth said that to Boaz, but that's not who she said it to. She said it. This actually is a whole nother thing because she actually said it to her mother-in-law, the
Mm.
mother of her dead husband.
Mm.
So what does that say of like women need to be sticking together in order to survive?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Go back and read it, friend. I'll tell you. I'll be interested to hear what you have to say. But I want to get back to this whole like idea of like sermons, right? Like what do we, what about the sermons that center like lust around women's bodies instead of like men's entitlement? Like what do you make of that?
Well, I think there's a few things. Like one thing I was going to say, I'm going to answer that, and I'm going to talk about something else you had mentioned. But I think, like one, I want to highlight that nothing that is said in the church exists in that vacuum. It always seeps into our society because our church is such a major part of shaping our cultural understanding of gender and sexuality. And something Christina Cleveland says in God is a Black Woman that I love is like male God is the bro God. He's like the God of the all male boardroom. He's the God of sexual assault. He is the God of anti abortion policy. And so, just this idea in general of saying that women are dangerous, are a danger to society, are a danger to the health of our institutions. Like the idea that women leaders cannot lead because they're too emotional or disruptive to men's ability to work well, like that shapes how we shape our organizations and institutions. And so, in general, the Christian men frame women as a destabilizing force, a socially destabilizing force, a politically destabilizing force that has to be controlled then through social policy and through our social political landscape. And so, I just think it's important to highlight like there's the micro of what's happening in our church institutions and the macro of how this shapes our society, policy, and women's access to health, well-being, all those things. And I think in general, one thing I will say about like these sermons about lust and celibacy, and I think that they do harm men too. Like I think that men even though I want to highlight over and over again, as we are, like the way that men can utilize sermons and church structures to perpetuate patriarchal violence by saying women are dangerous or by hiding their own sexual violence under the guise that they were tempted or forced into the behavior by a woman not controlling her sexuality. There also are ways that men are harmed by these narratives too. Like, I think there's a lot of evidence that shows that by framing us as lustful, by framing our sexuality overall, our human sexuality as dangerous, men and women, a lot of Christian couples can struggle to cultivate healthy sexuality, even in their marriages, because they've learned to see their body as shame. And I definitely have talked to Christian women friends who their male partners have so much shame around their body they can't be intimate with their wives, and they're not dangerous; they're just repressed. And so I think,
It's
like,
the
in
repression. The repression is so loud. Keep
yeah,
going. The
but
repression is like,
the
yeah.
repression is huge, and you could argue that, like, that repression also maybe creates even deepens rape culture in churches or a sexual assault culture in churches because it creates a idea of hiding one's like, I think particularly if people feel like they need to hide or repress their sexual desire, I think it means that they're really not accountable to when it shows up because they have a dual shame of harming someone else and having sin. So I think people are doing a lot to repress their truth in order to keep their status in the church too, which I think creates a culture of secrecy and a culture of harm. And again, I'm not trying to say that when you perpetuate sexual violence are deserving of more grace than women. But I mean, when we think about just the repression of sexuality overall, men who are not perpetuating violence, I think, are harmed in that too. And it's like the culture.
Well, I think what I would actually take it one step further of it's all a violence that is around gender in like general. Like I think that these binaries of gender do perpetuate violence for a lot of us, whether it be psychosocial violence, whether it be physical violence, spiritual violence. Like it's very loud when there are very rigid definitions of how you're supposed to exist in order to be accepted, in order to belong in the spaces that are supposed to help and protect you, that is violent. And that is such a detrimental way of existing because of the repression, right? And so like this hyper masculinity, hyper femininity, when it's not something that is like chosen or the performance of it becomes the violence within your own body because you have no other recourse of how
Yeah.
to exist. And you can't exist outside of those violent acts without like harming others and
Mhm,
harming yourself.
mhm.
And I think that's the thing that like it actually almost makes me a little bit sad for the ex-pastor. And this is where my humanity comes in because after I stopped raging about it, I really did think it's like how hard is it to live in a world where you can't just say out loud, I was uncomfortable and that be the story? Like, I was uncomfortable and I did not know how to handle it. Please, community, help me figure out how to handle this discomfort
But
rather than
I can't
that's
think
not
of
what he said.
your
That's not
age.
what he
So it's
said.
like I just feel like I can't
Well,
even.
that's where you have age and you have some form of economic privilege. So get a therapist and figure it out. Like that, you're still accountable, but it makes me sad for your lack of ability to find your own accountability.
Yes. Oh, definitely. But and I think also like I think like yeah, it's hard with him. It's hard for me because I don't like the age dynamic, so I can't give him grace. But I do think, but I know what you mean, and I still want to say like I know what you're saying in the sense of I think in a healthy world, he would think I shouldn't have thought that, and, like, I need to I don't know, like, it would be a passing thought that you think I shouldn't have thought that and just move on. No one even need to be privy of it. There wouldn't need to be a social conversation about it. You wouldn't have need to tell her anything, like, you have a moment, and then you move forward, I guess? I don't know, but I think that, like, in general, I want men to feel like they have a conscious accountability of their own sexuality. But I think that makes women safer. I think like when we say to men, you will be sexually tempted by women and it's hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
Then we also create this pathway for this deep dehumanization of women. And also like I think it makes men say like, well, if she's tempting me, then is deserving of violence. Like there's a way that we frame even the harm that women incur as their fault because if they weren't the temptress in the room, that man and I think men explain it away in that way too. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I double click, retweet, whatever. I Yes, I do have to go in a little bit, but I wanted to get your thoughts on this whole idea of public confession, because I think part of the thing that we're
I was gonna bring that up. I was gonna bring that up.
because that's a part of the thing that I also have a problem with, because I think that women don't get afforded the opportunity to have these same types of public confessions, right? If I come online and I say, I was out and about and I don't even know what the context would be, honestly. I can't even think of a hypothetical in which this would happen, and that I would come online to say this happened and I handled it like this. What do you community think? And then the comments be, "Oh, you're such a great person. Of course
I'm
you would
so
be protective of her piety. Of course
yes.
you're just looking out for her best interest," right? This whole idea, this veil of protection, when it's really just you going to your community to abdicate your responsibility or your agents. Like, I just, what are your thoughts? Like, I just, that
Yes.
that was the part that I was like, that is great,
Yes.
that's wild.
No, that's
But it
such a
happens all the time, because girls come to it like, let's keep it in the realm of sexuality, right? A girl comes and she's pregnant. I grew up in the 90s. People would come down to the altar and confess their, because there's a visible sign. And she talks about this in God as a Black Woman also. There's a visible sign of your sexual immorality because you're pregnant. And now you got to go in front of the entire church and confess your thing. But we never did that for boys.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I think that, like, sorry, I had a bug for a second. Yes, I love that you brought that up. Like, so freaking insightful, because I was thinking about that as well. And I think one, like, there is, of course, like I think Christians use a biblical precedent for like confession, which is like, like if you confess to your brother, your sins will be forgiven. There's Bible verses that talk about that. And there's like Bible verses that talk about how to like deal with conflict, like going to the person individually, then going to the whole church, then going to the church body, then like taking. And so I think like a lot of public confession happens through the lens of those scriptural references. But you're right that one, women cannot access the same type of public confession because women are actually held accountable for their behavior, whereas men are able to utilize public confession as a framework to not only like incur God's forgiveness, but also to basically get ahead of like it's like narrative shaping. Like they're doing like they're able to shape a public narrative about themselves through confession. And I think because our bar for accountability for men and women is so much different, and our standard of behavior is so different. For example, like we like on the internet, if I see a video, a podcast video with a famous rapper who's cheated, if he's saying something like, "I cheated, but I shouldn't have done it," all the comments will be like, "Look at him being accountable for this behavior. At least he is accountable." And so for men, often our framework of like, should they be forgiven is the confession. For women, it's a judgment of the behavior itself. But because I think we have such a low bar for men, if men display any kind of self-reflexivity, we say, well, that's worthy of forgiveness. Whereas women, it's the behavior itself is what we are judging, versus men, it's the language we're judging, I think. But I think also because we do frame men as more deserving of forgiveness, and again, we frame women as the temptresses and men as the tempted, I think there's also this way that men can be like, well, of course I stumbled. I am the one that is tempted, but look at me getting up again. But for women, it's you are the temptress. So how dare you cause this man to stumble? So I think if women tell their stories of cheating, or women tell a story in the church about having an abortion, it's the fact that you even engaged in that behavior is so abhorrent that you don't get to come back into the fold of forgiveness. But one way that men insulate their power in the church is by being able to come back to forgiveness again and again, because your behavior never matters, just the confession does. So I think public confession insulates their power because they're able to say, look at how pious I am in language, while never having to be pious in behavior because you're pious in language. It's crazy.
It's giving performative. It's giving. I loved what you said about it's like getting ahead of the narrative, which is a very narcissistic behavior trait. There's a book that I've been wanting to read, When the Narcissist Goes to Church. I've been wanting to read that for a little while, so I think I might gonna add it to my, like, put it higher up on my to be read list.
Yeah.
But what you said about who has the access to language, I instantly think about Cardi B and Offset. I love me some Cardi B, like that's my girl. But I did bite the bullet and listen to Offset on Keke Palmer's podcast, which was painful to listen to because
For cheating.
he is not he's remorseful but not accountable.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
more of like, well, the music industry, just the public does this thing to relationships. Not, I have 7 children and only 3 of which are with this woman and the rest of them are outside of my marriage. Like that was not the conversation, right?
Yeah.
And even as much as Kiki Palmer, who interviewed him, was trying to get him to kind of like go there, he just would not. And I think it is like it's a thing of I don't have to be responsible. I can come back. Whereas she is like, how dare you keep moving on with your life? How dare you continue to be a sexual being? How dare you go out and have more children? Like how the audacity of you to
Mm.
take ownership of your own existence outside of this man when you need to be shamed and ashamed of anything that has to do like and it goes back to your point of like it breeds into all different types of our culture. And I think one thing, if I could leave somebody with one little thing, I would want them to hold on to like what you're experiencing in your deconstruction journey is not unique just to your deconstruction. It's going to bleed over. You're going to start seeing it at work. You're going to start seeing it in your interpersonal relationships. You'll see it in your friendships. You'll see it in pop culture. All of these things, like it's a big macro issue rather than a micro issue, as you said before.
Yes, no, absolutely. No, that was spot on. Yeah, I've thought of like when I was mentioning rappers, I was thinking about Offset because I'd seen part of that interview too. And in general, just I've seen yeah, he did struggle with accountability. And I think the internet did see that. And I see cases sometimes where the man is kind of accountable or like does apologize and it's like, well, he did this and let's absolve him. And I want to be clear, like, I'm not into like punishment culture. I'm not into this idea of like, especially as someone who doesn't believe in like prisons and it is like an abolitionist in certain ways. Like I do think about what does it mean to hold accountable without necessarily punishment or shame. And I think I'm still figuring out what that is. But I do think we have this idea, like particularly in churches, like for example, when oh my God, there's a lot of people that are saying like young men that are coming forward about some of their experiences with TD Jakes and a lot's going around. And something he said on the mic is, "Even if I did do it, right, I'm covered by the blood of Jesus." And so men have this way of saying,
Even if I did that.
"Even if I did," and I think so many men in the church are able to operate with that type of impunity, where their behavior is always already forgiven. Always already is my favorite phrase from African American studies, just meaning like it is perpetually in existence and all time, before time, after time, all time, it is in existence. And so I think men have access to this always already forgiveness and women have to earn piety through their behavior and oftentimes through the repression of their own humanity. They have to fit into a very narrow box of what spiritual womanhood should be, which often means existing in an emotional range that is comfortable for your male partner. It means never holding your male partner or your male pastor or church or men within the church accountable, and it means not questioning structures of patriarchal power in the church. And I think like ultimately forgiveness is a power structure because who is within the circle of forgiveness and who is outside of the circle of forgiveness also determines who has access to spiritual authority. There's a reason that queer people are framed as being sinful in themselves because it means they can never have access to institutional church power because their body is marked as sinful. And I think cis heterosexual women move in also as being marked as sinful, particularly if their bodies or their sexuality challenge a male pastor's conception of themselves, meaning like I think a lot of male pastors have this idea that they're this paragon of spiritual incredibleness. And so when they do feel sexual desire for a woman, like it challenges their own self perception and they just place that onto women or they just place that desire onto women. So I think that's what I think about the most is forgiveness as a power structure that determines who can access not necessarily God's self, but God's favor, God's power, and who is imbued with purpose through God versus who is just forgiven by God, by the grace of God. And I think queer people and women are like just forgiven or like just like, here, damn. And like men are like, God,
Let
I
me tell you,
want you to be in that fold, you know?
let me tell you, every time we have conversations like this, I'm reminded how brilliant you are. Seriously. And on that note,
Yeah, you gotta get out of your game. Oh yeah, that's good.
what is your sacred descent when it comes to, you know, maleness as ministry? Or I mean, I guess maybe it's all of you the work that you do. Like you are, I mean, that's what I would say, just outside looking in. What do you say?
Appreciate that. I think for me, sacred descent, especially coming from like a queer phobic, male centric church, is embodiment, like being within my body, including like being able to access my sexuality and my sexual self, being able to like like how my body looks, being able to see my body as good. I think it's being able to be within myself without seeing myself as inherently sinful or inherently bad, because that's what the Christian church does to queer folks and to cis women often as well, and to trans folks as well. I'm very clear. There's a deep shaming of trans people's bodies. So I think if you are seen as, if you've been marked in the church, which I think many of us have been marked in different ways, reclaiming your body as good, I think is a great practice. And for me, being within my body and seeing my body as good is a big part of that. What about you?
I think I would double down on that. I think for me it's about seeing it and naming it on a consistent basis. Maybe a little less in the bodily way, but like in a spiritual, like just because that person is a pastor or of authority in this space doesn't mean that they are in authority in my space. There's just something about like you're supposed to give certain people respect, like that I just always like hold on to. Because even when I made the video, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I should even say this because, there's such reverence or whatever. But it's like, no, I need to say it the hard thing and I need to call that out and understanding that if I see it, I can't be the only one that sees it. And so remembering and relying that that is also sacred, like using my voice to call out the injustice and the unfairness and the disproportionate harm that these things create. That to me is like, that is me living in my godly truth,
Mhm.
not just perpetuating a system of rules and regulations. It's about who is this hurting and who is this helping and why, and how can I lean into doing the least harm, because I'm gonna hurt people. I'm a human being, but how can I lean into doing the least harm and not create space where it's okay to internalize spiritual violence?
Absolutely. I love that. I think that question around like how we do the least harm is so important. Yeah. I just love that. 'Cause I think it's hard when you grow up in, fundamentalist Christian spaces and you feel like you're told so clearly what is right and what is wrong. And then you kind of have to reevaluate all those value systems as you deconstruct. I think you do that so beautifully and do so well in public.
Girl, because I wanted to burn it down most of the time.
Well, thank you for this great conversation, Cass, but you got to catch a flight. You got
I do. I gotta go, girl. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I can't wait. I will send you a WhatsApp when I land, but I just love this space with you. Thank you so much for doing this project with me. This has been such a fun season. We're only halfway done.
Yes. My goodness.
Yeah.
And we're coming towards the end of the year.
I know. Okay, well, thank you everybody for listening. You know where to find us. All the links and all the stuff we talked about are in the show notes. We'll see you in the Patreon. We'll see you online, TikTok, Instagram, all the places. We appreciate you.
Thank y'all. Have a great one, and we right there with you. If today's conversation resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It helps more people find this space of exploration and connection.
And if you want to go even deeper, support us on Patreon. Your membership helps us keep these conversations going and gives you exclusive access to great content.
Because this isn't just a podcast, it's a community. And no matter where you are on your journey,
we're right there with you.